Next, I'd like to introduce Jim Dieter. He's our CEO of the Asset Leadership Network. He's been our pioneer leading this group. So, Jim, welcome.
Hey, another great day. This conference is really working out, being a virtual conference. What a great concept, and really appreciate Rhys's comments and the good questions. One of the things we wanted to do with this session is to help get people information about the different standards like 55,000, and Rhys, of course, expanded beyond that. It's great. But to understand different standards that are available and standard sources, we'll be talking more about that. And different kinds of certifications. And it's when people are just getting involved, it's not often clear when we say certification what we mean. So we've talked about ISO 55001 certification as an organization, which of course is, can have great value to organizations, but organizations can pursue 55,001 practices without getting certified. Similarly, people can be asset managers, asset leaders, without having a professional certification, but there's many available. And the Andrew James Advisory Group, Richard Utevilligan and Lindsay came to the ALN a couple of years ago with the thought of developing a program around ISO 55,000 training, because we saw that there was lots of good certification and training programs in asset management, but there wasn't one that focused on user level practitioner knowledge just on ISO 55,000. So ALN perspective, we try not to compete with other organizations. We try to find ways to work together rather than competing. But we saw this as an opportunity. So I was actually involved with AJAG and helping develop some of the materials on a consulting basis. But Lindsay will be telling us some about those materials and the certification that we developed, the A55K certification. I find it exciting because I've used this process, the training and the certification with clients. And it has value just as individuals to take the class, absolutely. But the stunning practice of using it, I believe, is to take it to an organization where you're starting an ISO 55,000 implementation and get everybody in the room that's going to be the key individuals involved, and get everybody on the same page on ISO 55,000. It can save you an enormous amount of time and money to get people speaking the same language. One example I was involved with, we had experienced quality person, we had experienced government property management people, we had an experienced, a relatively new facilities management person, we had some senior leadership people, so a lot of smart people, different backgrounds. And they knew how to spell ISO 55,000, and that was about it. And we went through this training class, and boom, everybody was ready to go. We were really, I can't imagine how much time it saved in our implementation, just having everybody on the same page. So with that, I'd like to introduce Lindsay Ziegler, and she can tell you about the training, because she is really, the AJAG and Lindsay and Richard Utevilligan have really taking it to another level. So welcome, Lindsay.
Thank you, Jim. I'm going to share my screen real quick here. All right, so since you already said I'm going to talk about training and certification, I'm just going to blow right on past that slide. So I wanted to start by saying that there are two types of certification to ISO 55,000, individual and organizational. And so organizational certification says that your organization is complying with the shall statements in ISO 55001, whereas individual certification, and this is what the ALN's A55K professional certification is, that certifies that the individual has the knowledge to participate in and contribute to ISO 55K asset management efforts. So my organization, the Andrew James Advisory Group, or we fondly refer to it as AJAG, provides training that qualifies an individual then to sit for the exam. There are plenty of other certifications out there. IAM and SMRP have them. Most of those are more focused on asset management activities such as maintenance and engineering. So you will see things like mean time between failure, mean time to repair, maintenance intervals, those types of best practices. And those programs and those certifications have value, but they don't really concentrate on the standard itself. Why do we care? Well, right now, ISO 55000 is gaining momentum in the US in particular, and in federal government agencies. Earlier this year, the Office of Management and the Budget, or OMB, released a circular um, dealing with federal real property management, and in that circular, they specifically called out ISO 55000 compliance. That was kind of good news to us because a couple of years ago, the GAO came out with a report that urged better asset management, but they stopped short of actually recommending ISO 55K. So we were kind of happy to see this OMB report. The result of that report is that now federal government agencies and the consulting and software and other firms that have government contracts have become a lot more focused on what is this ISO 55K and what do we need to do. And as a result of that, professional training and certification is also gaining. So we currently have 77 individuals that hold the A55K professional certification designation, and I expect that to be 82 by the end of next week. In this year alone, AJAG has trained 50 individuals in 3 firms, and all but 5 of them at this point have achieved the ALN A55K certification, and the other 5 are scheduled to take the exam within the next week. One single firm, LMI, has 46 certified practitioners so far, and they've established an ISO 55000 community of practice. So clearly, this is something that is gaining attention and that organizations are really getting interested in. So what kind of course offerings does AJAG provide? Well, of course, we have courses in both on-site and remote formats. At the moment, we're not doing on-site courses due to COVID-19. Everything is being offered in remote. The courses that we have a full ISO 55K/A55K training course, and that is either 4 days on site, which we hope against hope will be able to resume next year, or a 2-week online hybrid format, and we'll talk in a minute about what we mean by that. We also have an executive overview class, which is a brief for your executives who don't have any idea what ISO 55000 is. It's a brief, here's what it is and here's why you care. And then that leads into a 1-day ISO 55K summary course that provides a little more detail, including a bit of the information about, okay, so now you're interested in ISO 55K, here are the kinds of things that you need to think about to move forward with that. There is also a 4-day on-site course offered in Spanish through our training partner in Colombia, Rhys Consultores, and you will hear from Daniel Ortiz Plata in the ALN Español presentation, which is a little bit later in the agenda. We don't currently have an online version of the Spanish course, but we're gathering data to find out, to gauge the interest in that. So if anyone has an interest in the Spanish language online training, please contact me and we'll start to put that information together. So the course content, the course materials were primarily developed by Jim Dieter, who just spoke with us, and he was a member of the original ISO 55K creation team. It's the only course currently available that we're aware of that focuses on the strategic and tactical nature of the ISO 55K standards. And we cover the 3 principal standards, the 00, the 01, and the 02. We don't currently cover the O10 standard, which is financial management in the context of asset management. So we cover the 00 and 01 standards in depth, and the 00 is basically the why of the standard. It's what are the benefits of asset management, what is asset management, and then a large amount of terminology. You know, Jim spoke about keeping, getting people speaking the same language, and that's what the 00 standard does. And I'm going to apologize. I've got mowers out front and they're making noise, so hopefully everybody can still hear me. Then we cover the O1 standard, and the O1 is the shall statements or the actual requirements for compliance with ISO 55000. And again, we cover that one in fair depth. And then the course provides an overview of the O2 standard. It is primarily reference material on guidance and best practices. So it's kind of like an encyclopedia. You don't want to spend a huge amount of time covering it, but what we do want is to have people who are looking at the standards understand how much good reference material is available in O2 to help them as they're moving forward with their ISO 55000 project. Another thing I want to point out is we don't use any outside materials. So all of the materials that we cover are from the 55,000 series of standards, and that is what is covered in the course. That's also what's covered in the exam. Now, when ALN developed the exam, they did it behind what we called a Chinese wall, and that was deliberate. The exam is completely independent of the course. We actually literally don't know what's on the exam. I suppose if I had a photographic memory, I would remember what the questions were when I took it, but I don't, and I don't. So the main reason for doing that is to make sure that anyone who is teaching towards this certification is teaching to the standard and not just teaching to the exam. And we feel that's very important for the credibility of both the course and the exam and the certification. So we offer our online course through the Moodle learning platform, and this is an online learning management system that is heavily used in the higher education space for presenting online course content. And our course includes lectures, online exercises and quizzes, and then live instructor-led discussions that cover the online exercises, and also preparation of a strategic asset management plan, and that is based on an asset management case study which we have developed. Why do you want to train with the Andrew James Advisory Group? Well, we are the first organization to have training accredited by the ALN. We have a 99% pass rate, which is, we feel that's pretty good. Taking the course gives you access to experts in leadership and strategy and in various industries. So you get a lot of networking possibilities when you're taking the course. And we feel that that can definitely provide value to individuals. Now, our CBT hybrid course allows for online training combined with live access to our instructors and experts. And we also present what we call special topics, which are 1 to 2 hour lectures, including one on federal real property management, data management and governance, leadership and change management. And we are continually developing new special topics as time goes on and as we are working with other industry experts. So I want to take a second and just give you a little quick glimpse at the learning platform. So this is the Moodle learning platform. I've made it really big so everybody can see it. As you can see over here on the left, there's a navigation pane. And then over here on the right is the actual course content. And we have a welcome statement, and then we get into the actual course materials. Anywhere that you see this piece of paper with a corner tab down, that's a lecture. So I'm going to go click on the course introduction lecture, and this is what they look like, and then you play and listen to these lectures. And then you can navigate up there in that pane as well. So we have a lecture on an introduction to ISO 55000 that talks about what the standard is, how it developed, and kind of the history of the standard and what it's for. Then we go through the core concepts, and you'll notice that we have, now here we have a lecture on assets, and then we have a discussion. And we ask questions that are designed to make people think about what they're learning in the standard. And then we have people post responses to these, and then these are the basis for our live class discussions with an instructor. And then at the end of each major section, we'll have a quiz. And these quizzes kind of look like this. So you go into the quiz, and you'll see there are true, false, multiple choice questions. I don't ask any essay questions because I feel like the discussion topics provide all the essays that we need. And once you filled out the quiz, then you can take the quiz as many times as you want, because the purpose of these quizzes is not so that we can report your grade to your manager. The purpose of the quiz is to help cement your learning. I do, as an instructor, look at the results from the quizzes, but I'm looking for two things. If there's a question that most people have missed, then either it's a bad question or we've missed something in our training. If there's an individual who is really struggling, then maybe we need to work with and help that individual. So that's the point of the quizzes. Now we come down here, we have 55,001 section. Then we have a section for 55,002, SAMP development, special topics, and then at the very end of the course, we have a review session and exam review questions. Now, again, the exam review questions don't necessarily reflect what's on the ALN A55K professional certification exam because of that Chinese wall. So our exam review is not like one of these, like a GMAT prep course where they're using actual previous questions. It is simply a review of the material that we have provided. So that's basically what the training environment looks like. So we've gotten some feedback here, and I won't read it to you. I'll let you read it, and these slides will be posted. Next up, our next class is planned for November 9th, and that's a 2-week period beginning Monday the 9th. If you have interest in that class, you can click on the link here or type it in, or you can email me at lindsayz@andrewjamesadvisory.com. And that's my last slide. So I will turn the screen back over to Nick.
Thank you, Lindsay. I'm going to be quick because I know we're running short on time already, but Lindsay talked about the ISO 55000 professional certification program with AJAG, and I'm going to talk briefly about the ALN A55K professional certification exam, which is kind of the culmination of the course. And on that note, I want to thank the developers of the exam, Marlene Milamachi and Rob Leibrandt and Marcia Campbell. They were the developers of the actual questions and kind of in charge of making sure the exam is something that tests a student's knowledge on the standard itself, ISO 55000. So just briefly on the exam, it's through the popular LMS learning management system Moodle, which you got to see a little bit of from Lindsay's presentation. And the main difference is that we use Proctorio to remotely proctor the exam. Proctorio is a fully automated software that uses artificially intelligent facial detection technology and a host of other tools and data to really ensure a secure testing environment while protecting students' privacy. And so that's of course important because we want to be able to administer the exam remotely to as many test takers as are prepared, in case there's an influx of interest in the course and the exam. We'll be ready for that because we have this remote proctoring capacity. And again, just, wanting someone to make sure that there's no questions leaking or, other materials being used on the exam. We just really want to ensure that our certificate means something and reflects the knowledge and understanding of the student that received that certification. So really, that's all I wanted to talk about, just kind of the exam being similar in form and the culmination of the course and how we make sure that it is a test of students' knowledge. And I think, just for time's sake, I'm going to pass it on to Rich Culbertson, and he will start who is a ALN board member and ALN senior fellow, and he's going to start the panel discussion now, I believe.
Go through, part of this demystification. And so I want to focus on some clarity of certain issues. And I believe, for example, the definition of asset of ISO, that it's 55,000 changed everything. In other words, that definition, item, thing, entity, potential actual organization, tangible. Very, very important. In most cases, we manage tangible. Usually, you have the back office folks, the tangible, the executives. That's what we manage tangible. However, the understanding of assets. Also, goes on financial statements. The actions, probable benefits.
Hey, Rich,
yes.
Can I pause for a minute and just see if anyone else is hearing you, or if that's my audio that's not coming in clear, Dominic?
It's sketchy. It's coming in and out.
Okay.
Rich,
Rich, is there anything you can do to improve your audio? If not, I don't know.
No, I can't, because it's in my my computer. Can I get a little closer to that?
That's much better.
Helpful.
Yeah, it's been seeming good since we've been talking. I don't know what changed, but hopefully the problem won't persist.
I think closer was good and slower was good. So that's good.
Okay, so let's move on then. ISO 55000 is different. It does not require the item to be tangible, doesn't require proof for existence. It deals with probable benefit, or doesn't require ownership. One of the things that's really important in law cases is how this stuff began. And because my insights will go through how this started, 1995 provides that understanding. So the early Uruguay round agreement defines standards. It's a building block system. And the standards is approved by an organized body. That's a definition that the United States agreed to. And it's the conformity assessments that is also important within it. They mention both of those. The whole term of voluntary expert groups produce standards. Participant in technical expertise shall be restricted to persons of professional standards and experience. Next slide. In the United States, as a result of being a signatory to the Uruguay Agreement, there's the National Technology Transfer Advancement Act of 1995. It created a law. Here again, within the law, they believe this is central, to the economic, environmental, and social well-being of the country. And it defines technical standards, performance-based or design-based. Performance-based basically has to do with outcome. Design-based is how to get to the outcome. And it also refers to management systems factor, which is ISO 55000 management systems standard. Here's the kicker. All, and all's always a big word, federal agencies and departments shall use, shall is a big word too, technical standards that are developed and adopted by voluntary consensus standards or organization bodies. And to carry out their policy objectives, and procurement and such. Participation of an expert is a voluntary consensus standards body. That is voluntary. Adoption of standards by an consortium may not necessarily be voluntary. Keep that in mind. That's one thing that's hit me over the last few months here. Organizations are voluntary. I'm not paid. Folks on here are not paid to participate in this directly. However, adopting those standards is very, very important to organizations, and maybe they may have to do that. Next slide. OMB circular A119. You'll see the small b there. Office of Management. That's the management of the government, the executive branch. And here again, here's the instructions to the federal agencies and the participation and use of voluntary consent and conformity assessment activities. Developing standards on performance rather than design. That's important. Performance rather than design. Incorporating reference into regulation. Again, you can make a standard of regulation by incorporating this reference. So what's the policy for the federal use of standards? All federal agencies must use voluntary consensus standards in lieu of government unique standards in the procurement regulatory activities, except where inconsistent with law and otherwise impractical. Therefore, it's important for those of us who are involved in standards to make sure whatever's in there is consistent with law and practical. We'll provide this on the ALN website, as far as what this looks like, our references and such to this, so you can get a deeper view of what's required. Next slide. Here I've created essential government building block framework for a successful organization. And so when you go to this, you go from the bottom to up. And here again, you have fiduciary requirements. You've heard the word fiduciary a lot today. Here too, there are fiduciary requirements upon organizations that's imposed upon them. Mission, then my viewpoint, you go to internal control type framework. Usually that's either CASA or the GAO Green Book. Then above that, you have built in the assurance that's required. And that assurance can either be internal or external, based upon the GAO Yellow Book. Then you also review applicable laws and regulations. Then above that, international management system standards. Then internal policy, contracts, and other obligations. And above that, you have to have the willingness to do it, the competence to do it, and the wherewithal to meet the objectives. Those requirements are in there in order to reach mission success. On the right-hand side, as far as meeting requirements, that's how an organization must react to those fiduciary requirements. Things like mission statement, create an internal control framework, continuous audits, identification and recognition of applicable laws, adoption of consensus standards, ISO 55000, ASTM 2279, adoption of industry standards. Then again, incorporating this with things like alignment, requirements, assurance, policy plans, practices, process, and performance. And then eventually providing resources. Then assurance to mission success. Again, this is another way of looking at this. It's a little different from some of the other slides. I think what we've all seen, however, all this stuff is true. Depending upon where you sit, you may use a different type of model. Next slide. And I think we are done. Our next presenter is Jennifer Tursi. And Jennifer works for ASTM International. Jennifer, are you online?
Hi, Richard. Thank you very much for the introduction. I know that a lot of information has been discussed regarding certification, but I'll be presenting E53 Asset Management, another form where standards can be developed and utilized and implemented. Again, I'll be going over a brief overview of E53 and how standards are developed within ASTM, as well as going over additional information on ASTM as well. So next slide, Nick, thank you. So ASTM E53 Asset Management has been formed in 2000, the calendar year date of 2000. We have over 170 members with 12 different countries represented. We have 11 technical subcommittees with a jurisdiction of 33 standards. This committee is significantly active. We meet every other month via virtually, and the scope has recently been updated in the last year and a half. The main takeaway of the scope is the general area of the interest of the committee will include standards to support all aspects of personal property asset management, hereafter referred to simply as asset or asset management, including systems for the management of industrial, federal, state, and local government personnel assets, as well as educational and medical institution assets. The main takeaway of the scope is the work of this committee will be coordinated with other ASTM committees and other organizations having mutual interests. Next slide. Here's a list of all of E53 technical subcommittees. I'm not going to go through every subcommittee. We had recently just added E5305 asset leadership. Of course, we have a wide range of sustainability of property management, ISO management activity, and US government property management. Executive is simply administrative work. One of the things with ASTM International is we are one of the largest SDOs, but it's the scale of our involvement influence that counts for more. We comply with the 6 WTO principles for international standards, development, transparency, openness, consensus, relevance, coherence, development, dimension. We work across political, cultural, and geographic borders, recognizing expertise, not country of origin. This promotes a massive range of activity and phenomenal exchange of knowledge, trusted and known for market relevance and technical quality. Our standards are the choice of many global industries, typically around 49% outside of the USA. We also believe in the power of standards to inspire and enable people and economies. Our global outreach activities increase understanding about standards and their application, and our memorandum of understanding programs provide intangible to developing economies. Member participation around the world is what makes ASTM truly an international standards development organization. ASTM opens its doors to all interested individuals and organizations from around the globe that want to participate in the Society's consensus process for standard development. This process ensures that all interested parties have an equal vote in determining a standard's content. ASTM's enduring philosophy of consensus without borders helps make ASTM responsive and relevant to the needs of the global marketplace. As a result, more than 40% of ASTM's standards are sold outside of these states. This is an overall WBS structure on how a technical committee would work within ASTM. Typically, you have E53 as your main committee. Then you have your subcommittees, which I presented previously. And then below that, you can form actual task groups. Those task groups can actually formulate and develop further technical content to be projected into the subcommittee and then up to the main committee level. Standards are published documents that establish specifications and procedures to design to ensure the reliability of the materials, products, methods, and or service people use every day. Standards address a range of issues, including but not limited to various protocols that help ensure product functionality and compatibility, facilitate interoperability, and support consumer safety and public health. Typically within ASTM, one of the things that I'd like to just reinforce is the time frame that ASTM allows a technical person to develop a standard. Once that standard is developed, we'd like to encourage maintenance on it, but that standard can be valid at any time based on industry, organization needs, or if information needs to be updated within that standard. We allowed a mandatory 5-year review, but again, that standard can be validated at any time, and that typically we provide an efficient time frame to get that standard published. So if a standard goes through the consensus process, sub, main, and society review, typically depending, that standard can be published within a 1 to 2 year range. Next slide. These are just highlight an overview of benefits of being a part of ASTM. Obviously, everyone has a voice in the standard that affects the bottom line. We provide leadership training, task group with peers, additional support for meetings, interactive with industry experts and leaders, and additional opportunities to conduct webinars and or meetings at any time. It's very cost effective with the $75 membership, which includes the free volume, instead of actually just purchasing a single standard. Next slide. Again, here's a general overview of different levels of balloting. You have your subcommittee ballot, then your main committee ballot and society review, and then the final stages of COS. Each stage has a check and balance point. So if a new standard is developed, it has to go through subcommittee. That standard will be open on a ballot for X number of days. So anybody that is a non-voter or voting person can review the technical contact and either provide additional comments or negatives. Negatives are never perceived as a actual negative term per se, but allows additional input to further enhance the collaboration improvement of the standard. Next slide. This is just an overall scale of ASTM platform for regarding balance of interest within a subcommittee and a main committee. Classified technical committees are required to be imbalanced. Voting producers cannot outweigh the combined voting user and general interest. This allows a little bit more of a balance between the two. This just kind of illustrates the scale. We don't want to have one particular organization have an overpower of a specific standard. We really want to ensure that there is a collaboration and balance between each sub and main committee. Next slide. Of course, voting rights and voting versus non-voting, one official vote per interest company, all is equivalent to voting and non-voting members. So if you have all are welcome to participate in the technical discussions. All members receive a ballot and are eligible to vote on technical issues. All negatives are considered the same way. So if you are a part of a committee and you do not have an official vote and you have a negative on a sub or main ballot, that negative needs to be addressed. That will blockade the standard so that the technical information needs to be appropriately addressed. Next slide. Member participation from around the world is what makes ASTM a truly international standards developed organization. ASTM opens its doors to all interested individuals and organizations from around the globe that want to participate in the Society's consensus process for standards development. This process ensures that all interested parties have an equal vote in determining standards content. ASTM's enduring philosophy of consensus without borders helps make ASTM responsive and relevant to the needs of the global marketplace. As a result, more than 40% of ASTM standards are sold outside the US. This, again, is another diagram on how standards can be developed and go through the voting process. So of course, you don't have to be a member to be in the task group, but you can provide additional input to the subcommittee. And once that standard is developed at the subcommittee level and proceeds to a subcommittee ballot, you would require 60% return required and 2/3 voting affirmative required to move on to the main and society review. The main committee is 60% return required and 90% affirmative required, and society review gets it. That allows everyone to review the standard, and then the final review and approval of procedures is conducted at Committee on Standards. Next slide. This is a broad overview. If a negative is received on a specific standard, there are 6 different resolutions of a negative vote. You can find it persuasive, you can withdraw it, you can withdraw with editorial changes. The negative vote can be non-related, non-persuasive, or the negative vote can be previously considered. Typically, when the vote is found persuasive, then that means that standard will be removed from the ballot to allow the technical contact and sub-chair to actually revise the standard to go back onto a sub and or concurrent ballot to be reworked. A negative can be withdrawn at any time, and typically withdrawn with editorial changes is very minor. If it is technical related, then it will need to be revised. Non-related and non-persuasive is typically you will require 2/3 affirmative of the votes to find that vote non-related and non-persuasive towards the technical contact. And previously considered is typically when that negative vote has been casted multiple times by an individual. Next slide. And I would like to thank all ALN for their partnership, as well as providing the opportunity to present ASTM E53 asset management. All standards are important to develop and to implement. If you have any additional questions, please do not hesitate to communicate with me or Rich Culbertson, Chair of E53.
Thank you, Jennifer. This is fabulous. It is a very good effort in clarifying how this whole system works. And there's some differences between ISO and ASTM, but they're actually, in fact, pretty well aligned. Our next speaker is Jack Dempsey. Jack Dempsey is a leader of TC251. He is convener of Work Group 4 on improvement. Jack, we'd like to introduce and talk a little bit of your background, and it'd be wonderful to hear your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, and this has been a great discussion. I will be done on time, and it's pretty exciting. I mean, the work that goes into standards is just really significant, and getting a kind of a peekaboo view on how that works is, I think, important and value to people who are participating here. Nick, do you have slides? I know I sent some things in late. Otherwise, I do have some talking points that I can use. So I'm just going to kind of provide some additional thoughts on asset management. You can go to the next slide, please. and basically, I'm an asset manager. Learned it the hard way, how I think most asset managers learn how to be asset managers. But I think one thing that kind of resonates here that we've heard a lot is simply billions of people today in this world are operating, went to work, or consuming or delivering services on products. Based on standards, on ISO 55000 or ISO standards more broadly across the world. They don't know, and it's not really that important to them, but they know that things are working. So basically, what are standards? Standards are the collective wisdom of experts. They collect a lot of information, know-how, understanding, and there's a kind of a famous African proverb. Some of you may have heard it before. But if you want to go far, go alone. Excuse me. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So standards, and particularly standards that we're talking about here, is a way to go together in a way that really generates a lot of momentum, a lot of understanding and know-how. By using standards, you're basically tapping into a brain trust that's tens of thousands of people deep, and decades of experience collected into those. So it's good to use. I think we're all kind of on board with that. But really, I think the thing that I find most exciting about asset management standards, and we've heard a lot about it here in this presentation today and at other events that ALN is putting on, they really promote innovation. They help us understand with a context how to rapidly make use of and evolve new products and services. Standards really do focus on kind of decision-making. We talked about how there's the 6 capitals, the triple bottom line. It's not just financial, but really it's multi-criteria, multi-stakeholders. So standards are helping us do that. Having that foundation in our organization helps us get things done faster, simply put. Another aspect about the standards in terms of that management system structure helps us manage and adapt to change. It's pretty cliche. Everything's changing, the world's changing, it's become more complex. But how do we deal with it? How do we manage that? Having the structures of the management system in place helps us understand how things get done. So when a change is happening or an opportunity is presenting itself, we have a little bit more awareness of how to do that and what to do about that to make it more effective and more productive. So asset management systems, what do they do? We've heard a number of these themes already. They improve performance, reliability, resiliency. What is, and all that means. We talked a little about risk and uncertainty in terms of once you have that management system, how to deal with these changes and basically make things happen better. The ISO 55000 asset management standards, two things I really like about those are they do focus on the value. And the value really goes to who are the stakeholders and what do they value. So there's that conversation has to be had and understood. Rhys and others here talked about a multi-criteria perspective. That involves many, many people with many, many perspectives. But one of the things, and probably one of my most favorite pick-offs in the standards, the 55,000 standards, is they're really not about assets. They're about managing the value generated by assets. It's a subtle, but I find it to be a very important theme and understanding. And it's important to kind of keep thinking about it. It's not necessarily is going to make you a superstar overnight. It's going to give you the tools to understand your operating environment and the value, getting down to that value equation. So I think it's good to see the greater adoption. I think we're going to see a lot more of that. If you go to the next slide, please, just have some final thoughts on this. So, so what do asset management standards do? Or how do you kind of structure the thought process around them? So first of all, they focus on objectives. All management system standards in ISO do focus on objectives. And I think as an addition, Rhys made a comment on the environmental standards, on sustainability, finance, and asset management standards have, I think, a little extra bump in there. And of course, 55,000 is focused on the strategy of how to apply and organize those objectives. It's a management system, so it talks about policy and process. That means lots of things, but it's basically the know-how in organization, the standard operating procedures that are used by an organization to effectively manage to those objectives. Standards are also in the asset management system is built to streamline and organize the activities and workflows. So it's not just here's a structure, here's a rule book. It's really meant to improve, accelerate, motivate, organize, communicate, increase understanding, shared interest in things. And that's the activities. So it's not just here's the rule book. It's basically now let's start exercising them. And that generates a learning process, which is basically a number of feedback loops. One thing that I find very important about the standards, and as an asset management consultant in this area for a decade or more, is a lot of organizations know how to manage assets really well. They know what to do in terms of, oh, I got to do this next. I got to do a planning activity. I got to prioritize a list of projects. I got to go talk to the architect to have them or her, her or him figure out kind of what happens next and make sure the executive's on board. But in the end, the ability to do a plan versus actual analysis. How well did our plan work from last year? Are we learning about how to avoid problems in the future? I think all of us experience places where, man, why are we always hearing this kind of, this part of the game? I mean, I think personal experience in the federal sector, for example, so much of the contracting actions happen at the end of the fiscal year. And every year, like both sides of the equation are like, why is it like this? Well, there's a management system behind that I think if it's looked at in a way on how to organize activities, there might be opportunities to avoid that. I know a lot of people think about that kind of things, but that's what a management system is doing. An asset management system is really looking at how to achieve that in terms of the value generated by your assets, physical assets, intangible assets, and so on. Some concluding thoughts on how to implement an asset management system and using the standards. The first thing is, if there's kind of a switch, you have to understand and accept management systems. Or a systems approach. It's one thing to say, yeah, I kind of learned how to do it this way. I'm going to keep on doing it this way, and we're going to keep on trying to do it better. There's really an important aspect, and I think Lindsay kind of highlighted that in terms of the need to take a step back and really kind of get your heads together in terms of what do you need to do in terms of understanding the terminology, the concepts, and how all that works. That's a really important part, but it also helps you kind of get your game face on in terms of what you need to be doing next. So then you go about, okay, we're an organization, we're starting to figure this out. Now let's do it. Let's establish and use a systems approach. And all cool things. It's once you get started, it's a lot of excitement. You start to figure things out, and then you get into the invariable, kind of that middle ground where you're like, oh, this is more complicated than it is, and so on. But basically, one of the things that's really important about the use of management system standards is, again, focus on the objectives. Objectives aren't just a list of things to do or good ideas. They are built in a systems approach. They're built in as prime motivators. You constantly go back to your objectives. You constantly evaluate how you're performing to achieve your objectives. Are there opportunities where you were able to overachieve your objectives, or are you underachieving your objectives? What do your stakeholders think about objectives? Objectives become a central point in terms of that thought process and how you have those types of conversations. The next thing is implement and deploy. A lot of work that's done, particularly kind of in the consulting area, is like, okay, now you want to do something. Let's get it together. Let's start figuring this out. Let's update the policy, sprucing this up a little bit. It's going to be kind of exciting, stuff like that. There's an energy that needs to go into that. And we're all pretty familiar with organizational change. You need executive leadership. You need like a wide berth of thought leaders in terms of your organization participating at multiple different levels. It can't just be kind of a, kind of cooked up in a laboratory, so to speak. It's an art of participation. So we implement and deploy. The thing that becomes kind of interesting is as you start learning asset management and start kind of getting in, there's things called like maturity continuums and so on. You start getting good at it. You start understanding what the balance points of the system are, how risk is being evaluated and managed. And then you just kind of like let it go. But the reality is a systems approach is actually, and a number of speakers here today talked about it, it's just the way you do business. It's not like that was good. Now let's get back to get work done again. I think Rhys made a couple points where organizations might have a quality management system, an environmental management system, and an asset management system, and then they're like, we're good. No. It has to be kind of the essence of how you operate as an organization, how you do things. So you develop it and you're practicing, constantly practicing. Inherent to a system, management system, asset management system that we're talking about here, is a continuous improvement process. It becomes an active feedback activity. The thing is at the outcome of that learning, the training, the implementation, and deployment is basically now you're operating at a higher level. That's the expectation. And then that's where the real value is generated. It's not just in becoming asset management experts or asset management practitioners or certified in asset management. The reality always is why did you start to do this in the first place? And ultimately, it's basically get to that higher level as fast as you can, use your organization, use the people in your organization to kind of think their way through that. No two asset management systems are the same. Pretty exciting stuff. And the root of how all that happens has a lot to do with understanding how standards work. So I think it was an excellent presentation today. Really enjoyed the speakers, really enjoyed my time here, and I am done. Over to you, Nick.
Oh, thanks, Jack. Really good. I did want to, we were running a few minutes behind, but Dominic, since you had that unique perspective from an organization doing system certifications, we wanted to make sure that you had a few minutes to sort of tie that ribbon around it at the end. Now, I know we are at our normal closing time, and if there's people that have to leave at this time, I certainly would understand, but hopefully be able to stay on for, give Dominic a few minutes to talk about how that certification happens.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Jim or Jack hit it on the head. Organizations, when they adopt a standard, they really should be looking at the reasons why they're adopting it and not just doing it to put a certificate on the wall. They really want to make sure that the asset management program or any standard that they implement is built towards the actual processes that they're operating and they're driving value and benefit out of it. The certification process, it's a 3-stage process. First, we start off with the RFP, where we ask the organization for various information about their organization and the scope of activities and what's included in the scope and boundaries of that organization. And from that point, we develop our, what we call our audit days on site. And the audit actually is a two-stage process. The first stage is a stage one, which we call it. We'll come in and evaluate the organization's documented system, making sure that it meets the elements of the standard on the surface. And then if there's any items that need to be addressed before we go to the actual stage two, we highlight those areas, and it gives the organization an opportunity to fix those areas or put more substance behind it. And then we'll go through what is called the stage two audit, where our auditors will go out into the organization. We do our core element activities, which includes management review, internal audits, what your KPIs are and goals. And then we get out into the field and we actually see how the standard has been implemented. And we look at the organization, interview your employees, look at how assets are being operated, and then making sure those are meeting the intent of the standard. And then if all goes well, we issue our certificate, which is valid for 3 years. And we go in and do an audit on an annual basis, which is not as comprehensive as our certification audit, but it covers elements, the core processes and the core areas of the audit, as well as to ensure that the actual management system is still operating effectively. And then what we do there is we have an audit once annually. And then once that period ends, we go into what's called a recertification audit, which is a little bit more in depth. And then if all goes well, again, we issue a 3-year certificate, and it follows the same process. So we do have many clients that see the value in certification. And again, it's really important for organizations to develop a management system which will drive return on value, return on benefits, and to really making sure that you're driving continual improvement within the organization and get what you expect out of it. And that's important for all of us to know. And when you look at ABS quality evaluations, like I started earlier in my conversation, we are a global organization. And the clients that we have within our group, we call them our partners, and we really want to make sure that they're getting the value that they need, and they're not just hanging certificates on the wall, but it's really driving the life cycle of assets, return on investment, higher profitability, making sure you're understanding, your environmental impacts and aspects as well. So we're really focused on those type of activities when you're rolling out a management system program. Thank you, Jim.
Oh, awesome. Thank you all. Thanks to all the speakers. A lot of information again. And we are pretty aggressive in trying to fit a lot of information in. So we appreciate everybody hitting the key points and going forward. But special thanks to Rhys today for his keynote. It was really interesting to hear that perspective and what's happening. Good news. And all the panelists. So hopefully useful. I'll turn it back to Nick, but I think, Nick, today, after you do your close, we'll leave the channel open for a few minutes to see if anybody wants to stick around for a little open discussion for a few minutes and see how that works.
Great. Well, yeah, I just wanted to show our organizational member slide. Just never forget them, because, we need them for this to be possible. And with that, I guess we're not ending the meeting immediately. So if people have to leave, feel free. And if you'd like to stick around and talk, if you're a participant, we can get you privileges to speak if you'd like to.
Yeah, just enter something in the chat, and we can turn on your microphone and or your video. That'll be up to you if you'd like to continue. But let me, while we're seeing if anybody takes us up on that, Rich, do you like to share any thoughts on today's presentations?
Yes, awesome. I think this is one of the best panels we've had in a long time. I mean, we certainly have the key people, the right information, and hopefully we do a good recording of it and be available for others to see this. Again, really necessary information, things that should folks should know. But excellent.
Yeah, I yeah, the same sentiments as Richard. I thought this session was excellent, well, as well as some of the others. And you know, it's really important as we talk about the activities and the asset management, especially our group. There's a lot of value in this program, and it's exciting to see a lot of great people getting on and talking through various areas that we've noticed in our own business activities. And I'm looking forward to the future as well.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
there are perspectives, and each of those perspectives is true from that perspective. And so it's good to learn from various folks that how they're seeing the world and how they implement them.
I think a question came through: how is everyone handling authorized use in the private sector? We have a huge problem with test equipment being used on unauthorized contracts. I mean, I could speak on a certification perspective. As we go out and audit organizations, if they're certified towards ISO 55000 or any other management systems, we look at the quality objectives and what their clients are requesting of them. And that's part of the whole process of being certified, is making sure that they're meeting consumer confidence of either a service that they're delivering or a product that they're offering, to making sure that they're meeting the expectations of their client base as well as the activities that they're doing.
Dameron, I think I see you're unmuted. Would you like to turn your video on and or say any more about your question? Maybe he doesn't know his microphone's on.
Yeah, I'll start off. Having been responsible for those types of situations before, there's various ways of handling it. Contractually, and having authorized use, putting things on a capital versus direct charge to where somebody else owns it and controls it. And of course, the training aspect of it, and there's marking opportunities. It can be done, but it takes a lot of discipline. It doesn't happen on its own.
Let's see, Lindsay, your thoughts on any thoughts you'd like to share?
Okay, I can unmute. Cute, cool. Great discussion. I particularly enjoyed. Oh, all right. You can have my face too. I particularly enjoyed Rhys's presentation. Rhys, that was great stuff. Really interesting to think about the intersection between capital management and asset management and the environment. The really good food for thought there. I think that's pretty much it. I think, we're moving forward, and I think we're in an exciting phase where there's a lot more attention being paid to asset management in general and ISO 55000 in particular, and that it gives me a lot of hope for the future.
So Jennifer, how about you?
I enjoyed each presentation, a wide range of standard development. It's always fascinating on what's being developed and how we're implementing it, going through different phases and what organizations may need and or require. I'm the person that sits behind the lines of action, and even though I'm the tag holder of the TC, I know what's going on, but it's really fascinating to kind of see how other organizations, ASTM, ISO, ALN, and how each are very vital to the development process. So, but I thought it was very, very informative.
Good, thanks. I just had, in listening to the comments, I had an interesting thought, at least to me, with among the recent developments and occurrences in our country in this difficult year. Myself and some friends in a neighborhood started a book club, and we started reading the book How to Be an Anti-Racist, which is a book I would really heartily recommend. It was a total eye-opener for me as an old white guy. I didn't know what I didn't know, and I thought I knew there was lots of stuff I didn't know, but there was way more stuff that I didn't know that I didn't know.
That's true.
Really good book, worthwhile.
What's it called, Jim?
I'm sorry?
What is it called, Jim?
The book is How to Be an Anti-Racist.
Okay.
Actually, the man that wrote it's right from this area. He was originally from Brooklyn, but he's from New York City, I think Brooklyn. And he lived in Prince William County right out here. I used to live out there. But the reason that I particularly mention it is he talks about the intersection of racism and sexism, racism, and other factors and gender identity and things like that. And the idea, I thought that idea of using the word intersections was a really powerful concept to start to get to this kind of multivariable analysis that Rhys was talking about. Not just to talk about one thing, but to talk about two things. And then maybe we get to more complex questions of how those interact with other things. Mm-hmm. Today we were talking about the intersection of asset management and standards, I think is a way to describe it. We've had suggestions over this week about other intersections we could have, about the security infrastructure organization, CASI, I think it is, CISA, the infrastructure specific plans around security. And it's a government agency. That would be an interesting intersection. Next week we have our day on equity and asset management. And I think, I see the IAM has a program ongoing. It's great. I've seen some great videos they have about, equity in their own organization. I think, we are also making those kind of considerations and did so in the development of this agenda this year. We always think about it. We thought about it more this year and made sure that we weren't blind to some of these things we didn't know. But beyond that, it's the huge intersection between asset management and racism and a number of other social issues. We just can't deny that these have huge impacts. Where pipelines get built, where buildings get torn down to build infrastructure for other people, and who's that working for? And there's just so much there. Rhys also, of course, talked about intersection with the finance, the intersection with the environment, intersection with sustainability. Marty Rowland is, opened our eyes on new ways to think about infrastructure in terms of not the physical structure, but the services provided. It's about education. Well, what are the assets you need? What's the infrastructure you need to provide education or food in cities, et cetera? So I think, at least in my thinking, it's going to be a new part of the way I think about asset management. Is about intersections and how we can investigate those and learn. Yeah. I think sort of the history of this is of the ALN and the ISO TC 251, and specifically the US tag, were involved in, the early stages of that, and through the development, I'm still involved, but, was leading it with a lot of good people. But what was interesting about the US group is we had so many different interests. And we all thought what we did was asset management. We weren't sure about these other people. But we learned to capitalize on those differences and those intersections. And it really helped inform our US participation in the larger ISO 55000 effort. All right, I've gone on long enough, that's all. Nick, how about you? What do you got to say?
Great discussion there, Jim. I did also enjoy the talk of intersectionality between asset management and leadership and sustainability, and kind of expanding terms like value and sustainability to mean more and to be viewed in different lenses as those terms, you know, intersect with the environment or, you know, life cycle of buildings and et cetera. So I went to a liberal arts college, and intersectionality was a big term that we discussed in the context of almost every subject that we came across. You know, we were kind of looking at how various subjects, topics, problems intersect with other ones and other user groups.
Hey, before we all cut off, how did Dr. Kofi Smith do yesterday?
That
Fabulous.
was the best asset management presentation I've ever seen.
Really? Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rich. You were going to say something.
No, I just said he did a fabulous job. He incorporated a lot of things that were said today. And, you know, all of our charts were done independently, you know, and it's amazing. There were some central themes, like fiduciary. And there's obligation of folks to be able to, when you're running an organization, there's a trust factor you have to go through. And you can't do away with your fiduciary responsibilities, including accepting assets, asset management systems. You know, these are things that have to be done.
Yeah.
Dr. Smith did so good, and one of my favorite pieces was when he was talking about, you know, people, employees, and non-employees as assets, which seems kind of like a sticky, potentially issue, but his way of navigating that was so good, and just his kind of central idea of, like, if you treat your people better, you know, they will be more valuable to you in a way, or increase value, you know, and just that thinking, I think, intersects heavily with ideas of racism and sexism and socioeconomic issues, all of that.
Yeah. I mean, I've met him a couple times, and you know, we chat once in a while, but to me, he's just a really good person. You know, he's got a great soul, and to me, he's got a lot of energy too. So it's like, I was curious on how he performed yesterday.
A leader. Yeah. Yeah. So Mike, your video isn't on and your microphone isn't on. You get the last word then.
I've been observing you doing such a good job of leading the discussion. Dominic, it is recorded. All of our sessions are recorded, so we're going to be hosting them as an entire panel, you know, an entire event, but we're also doing snippets, and we'll do an individual section so people can, you know, spend time with just one and then come back for another. So you didn't miss anything. Don't worry about that.
Excellent. I was in pre-op surgery yesterday. I'm having my shoulder replaced in 2 weeks.
Wow. Good luck with that.
Oh, thanks.
That's an asset management on a personal level that is quite incredible.
It is. I'm going to a really good place. I'm going to hospital for special surgery in New York, so I'm feeling pretty confident.
Okay, good. I really liked the theme of this, which was demystifying certification and standards. And each of the presentations did a very good job of making things very clear. I think we'll be able to teach a master's course based on each of the presentations given today. Jennifer, wow, you just really stepped through that in a very methodical way. I'm so glad we've got that recorded, because we'll be going back and referring to that frequently, I'm sure.
I tried to be as concise as possible, Mike. Thank you.
And you were, actually. I was freaking out a little bit about time, but I was like, we couldn't have stopped, you know, you had to get through that whole thing, and I'm so glad you did. And I'm glad we've got on record the statements you're saying about what is required. This is the law. It's not a good thing. Need to be doing this. And
Yes.
we can step up and say that with a lot more courage of our convictions. Um, and
It's, to answer your other two questions that you'd written to me,
yes,
unfortunately, you had one really good question regarding case studies and whether or not we've possibly reviewed the duration and the time frame depending on the standard. Usually that ranges between 1 year to 2 years. I don't
Okay.
have an official case study to actually provide quantified information, say, hey, this is our average. This is what we're doing with X, Y, and Z committees. It really comes down to the standard and the development process of it and how many negatives it receives. And sometimes a standard could be really good, but then once it gets to those other levels of other people reviewing the standard, it can blockade the process, and the technical contact would either have to discuss the standard at a subcommittee level, at main committee level, and review the standard or provide additional inputs. So I unfortunately, I wish I had that technical information to provide, but it really comes down to the standard itself and the level of participation and collaboration from the members. So each committee is really different. E53, the members, also with the TC, are very, very heavily involved. And we have to be really mindful. Everyone is volunteering to do this. You know, their personal time away from family, work, and other certain circumstances, and really continuing to participate and wanting to grow. So it's really great.
We're geeks. We're all geeks. Jennifer, what's in the hopper? What is interesting? What is developing? What's exciting too?
Is specifically with ASTM or E53?
E53, but whatever.
Well, E53, I mean, right now, obviously, we're working on the new standard with Jim, which, we have an action plan with that. That's very exciting to work on and develop. As always, there's different perspectives. The scope for E53 has been recently revised, and there's definitely additional opportunity to further develop and improve the standards within the subcommittee levels. And we're also wanting to improve ASTM form usability, so it's a little bit easier for members to actually access the information, review ballots. There's a lot of changes that are going to occur in the future. I can't really specifically say at this moment, but we'll definitely improve what ASTM is about, how to develop standards, and making the process a lot more transparent. Sometimes we kind of assume, hey, it's right here on the platform. But again, if you're a brand new member, it can be a little bit challenging and daunting if you're not going to the platform all the time. And of course, we're also looking at other outreach programs, MOU development, looking at other specific organizations to adopt specific standards. So there's a lot of exciting things happening as a whole within the organization.
So 20 years ago, NPMA had the concept developing standards for property management. And one of myself and Lyle Hesterman and
Yes.
John O'Shaughnessy, and then Steve Michelson joined us, and we're working on it. And then John did some research and discovered ASTM and said, hey, they know how to develop standards. We don't want to be a standards development body, I don't think, because that's complicated. And so we did that. And ASTM is awesome at developing standards. And their support staff has been remarkable in a couple different ways, remarkable over those 20 years. And Jennifer's done a great job in that staff support role, which includes, of course, the E53 standards, but also includes the US tag, administering that, which is not necessarily in the favored sweet spot of ASTM, but is an important activity, and they really support it, wonderfully.
No, and again, I really appreciate the partnership, Jim, and the long history with ALN. I have the original news clip of the newspaper. I'll have to send it to you from 20 years ago when it was initiated. So.
I have a little stack of, there was an article John O'Shaughnessy wrote that was published in the ASTM magazine. And then we had a whole stack of, print, just that article printed out by ASTM, and it was called The Third Resource. It's a good article, and it might be worth, I don't know, is there any way we can, link to that, resurface that and post it on our website or link to it or something? It really informed my thinking a lot.
Within the committee documents, it's just that folder specifically is just shared with the committee. We can upload any past documents so that can be linked appropriately, and or we can also promote it on the public page as well as additional information so that new members can understand the history a little bit better, and the longevity, and all the new standards have gone through the ASTM process and continue to be further developed and enhanced. So yes.
God, it makes me want Thai food. I went out to John O'Shaughnessy, spent many years in Thailand. And at one of our NPMA events, we took like 20 some people and, went to this highly recommended Thai restaurant. And John O'Shaughnessy ordered for everybody. And I had food that I had no idea even existed, and have not ever seen since that night in the Thai restaurant. It was something. But I always think of Thai food when I think of John O'Shaughnessy.
And it's unfortunate. I know that we had our 20th year anniversary, and both Rich and I had a lot on our plate to plan, and unfortunately, due to the unfortunate circumstances, we postponed it. So, so that will be in the works, hopefully for 2021, when we are able to safely, possibly meet in person. So
Your 20th anniversary +1.
I know it'll have to be an inside joke.
Can you read it?
Right there, right there. We see it. It's a ASTM plaque, and it says Jim Dieter, but read us what the rest of it is.
Committee 53 on Property Management System awards this appreciation to Jim Dieter in recognition of his exemplary participation in Committee E53 that led directly to the development of ASTM 2135, standard terminology for property and asset management. June 2001. So there's the connection. That's what I was going for. We have the 20th anniversary of the first standards being published.
Yeah.
They must have meant it, Jim, if they engraved it in metal.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you guys are still doing these, but we used to give these out to whoever was the task group lead that developed the standard. Rich is getting one of his.
Anyone who developed a new standard, we order the plaques for them. We gave them to Rick Schultz and Marty. So yeah.
Cool, great.
We'll do that. Yeah.
Dust that off.
Aline looked at me when here I am in my downstairs office, and I started putting these plaques on the wall. Aline's like, "Are you out of your mind?" And I said, "No, it makes me feel good." Those are Those are some
Telling me I'm a good
achievements
person.
and memories. What'd you say, Rick?
They're telling me I'm a good person.
I need that feedback.
Yeah, we all need that.
When my parents had parties, at the end of the night, my father would say, honey, let's go to bed so these people can leave. And I think that if we don't end this meeting, then we've got 7 people that will just continue on. So we should probably do the good thing and let them move on. But this has been
We have permission to leave now.
additional discussion that we will definitely include as a separate item on our website for people to be able to watch this discussion.
Well, I think we should call out Amelia and Anderson and Cecilia and George and James and John and Madalena and say thank you for hanging in there with us. You know,
You're
hope you have
actually
a-
all made active now. So if anybody who is still on and hasn't said anything, especially John Shellness, you've been very active participant, and this is our chance to give you some time to talk. But they all might also be off somewhere else and just need us.
I'm actually sitting right here listening intently and having enjoyed this thoroughly, and it's bringing me back to my old days at McDonald's with asset management, as an asset management person, and just knowing that that title back in the day, it's very funny. You know, we were dealing with the fact that the biggest and most important asset to McDonald's were the new stores, and I was in the area in charge of the existing stores, and we've heard earlier today of that in-between portion of the life cycle of an asset, and it's been real interesting to hear the whole concept of standards and looking at it from a systematic, strategic perspective. And coming from a company called Strategies Insight, I just love this. And so I could sit here and listen to you guys all day. I need to be doing some other work, but I have enjoyed it. So thank you very much. Lots of learning, and has me enticed to think about getting a designation even. We'll see. But it was very interesting. So thank you for putting together a great, thus far, a great forum. I've really enjoyed it. And we'll
This is a good chance for us to plug Cecilia, who will be on a panel next Tuesday for our addressing inequity with asset leadership. And then next Thursday, our first ALN Espanol event, all in Spanish. So thank you for paying attention this week and for your involvement next week.
Yes, I hope that I can bring something to the table that will be as informative as what was brought today, because it's been very interesting for me. Might not be as technical when you come to us, but some of that systemic stuff is still necessary in commonplace thinking and understanding, which common sense is not always too common. And the concept of simplification of management systems and breaking it down as you guys have, and creating standards that we don't reinvent the wheel, but have what great minds have put together and have a common thing across cultures that can be implemented is very, very exciting, and warrants making sure that we all start talking about it and thinking about it.
That's great.
Thank you.
Mindfully.
I think Cecilia gets the last word then. That seems appropriate.
I like it. I like it. Well, thank you so much.